New hobby zines. League championship convenes. And Zach Moore, well, preens. I'm David Hood of the Diplomacy Broadcast Network, and this is Deadline, DBN's monthly news program. Dateline, January 2022. For our feature story, we are blessed in this hobby with a cornucopia of options for playing diplomacy online. There are the venerable older website-based venues such as Web Diplomacy, Play Diplomacy, and V-Diplomacy. And then there's the newer sites and apps such as Backstabber, Conspiracy, Diplicity, and Primacy. But hold on now, which one of these is actually the best? Each has its partisan defenders, and hobbyists frequently argue this point. So later in the program, we'll have a pointed debate on this subject between three seasoned diplomacy players, and you can decide for yourself who comes out on top. But first, a look at headlines from around the world of diplomacy. The 2021 Virtual Diplomacy League is now a wrap, with the January 15th VDL Championship Board having produced a spectacle which some have called the best virtual diplomacy game ever played. Frenchman Nicolas Taillet won the top board with a spectacular performance, playing, what else? France, over an experienced field including Karthik Conniff, Mikarlis Kamarites, Brandon Fogel, Tom DeGrief, Jason Massbaum, and Ben Kelman. Taillet joins the regular season VDL champ Fogel on the list of those with automatic bids to the DBN Invitational Virtual Extravaganza, which kicks off the weekend of February 18th through 20th right here on the Diplomacy Broadcast Network. The final game will be played the following Saturday, February 26th. Be on the lookout for the next episode of Countdown right here on DBN for the latest on who is catching February fever and who will miss the cut and then just be sick with envy. Speaking of the DBNI, an automatic bid was also just awarded to Vincent Roulet, winner of the French Language Virtual League Championship, which was also played on January 15th. Also playing France, he bested a top board consisting of Christophe Bourget, Emmanuel de Pontevice, Loic Bourget, Steve Personini, Nicolas Sauguet, and Nicolas Constantin. With his France ending in 11 centers in winter 1907, Roulet edged out the 9-center Turkish position of Constantin. The last chance to achieve qualification points for this year's DBNI then will be at the virtual Cascadia event to be played on the VWCDC Discord server on January 29th. This one-day, two-round event takes the place of the face-to-face event normally held in Vancouver, but which was recently rescheduled to July 9th and 10th due to COVID. And then the 2022 diplomacy season kicks off that same last weekend in February with TotalCon in Marlborough, Massachusetts, then followed by PoppyCon in Melbourne, Australia, April 23rd through 24th, and the North American Diplomacy Championships, DipCon, which is hosted by the Whipping Tournament in San Jose, California on April 29th through May the 1st. The diplomacy hobby's flagship publication, Diplomacy World, just released its 156th issue. It is chock full of varied and interesting dip-related content. Variant editor Bob Durf continues his search for the worst diplomacy variant ever, by this time considering Vincent Moose's Fall of the American Empire. Frequent virtual diplomacy denizen Farron Jane is interviewed in this issue by Randy Lawrence Hurt. And then former DW editor and hobby legend from the very beginning of postal play, Konrad von Metzke, is remembered by many, given his recent passing. Rounding out the issue of DW, a wrap-up of the last demonstration game, reports of awards both by and to Zachary Moore, and much more. Check out this latest edition at www.diplomacyworld.net. It's the beginning of a new year here in the world of diplomacy, which means it's time for our yearly check-in with North American Diplomacy Federation President Siobhan Nolan. Let's head out to California now for that conversation. Hello, Siobhan Nolan, and welcome back to Deadline.
Hi, David Hood. It's always good to be here.
Sean, you're here because it's the beginning of a new year, and you are the president of the North American Diplomacy Federation. So we always like to check in with you at the beginning of a new year and sort of be the Janus two-faced God. Look a little bit backwards, look a little bit forwards. So first, tell us a little bit for good for people that might not know what the NADF does. Tell us just a little bit about that first, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So the NADF, or the North American Diplomacy Federation, if you don't like the shorthand acronym, we oversee all of the face-to-face tournaments that happen in North America. So mostly in the US and Canada at this point. Someday I hope we'll get something in Mexico as well. We don't have any ambassadors there yet. But we have a really robust hobby. It's been really strengthened over the last couple of years, and I'd like to talk about that. But, we oversee all of that. We talk about just everything that needs to happen and give all the support we can to local tournament leaders.
And you have a website for the NADF, and you have a board for the NADF. So talk to us about the board, if you would.
Absolutely. So as it is a new year, happy 2020, everyone, or 2022, sorry, 2020 version 3, that's what I've been calling it in my head. It's 2022, and every year we cycle out 2 of our board members. So this year, Chris Brand from Vancouver, Canada, and David Miller from, I believe he's still in the DC area, though he was talking about moving, so someone correct me if I'm wrong about that. Are leaving us this year. And so the current board, we are cycling in. Welcome to Riaz Virani, also from Vancouver, Canada, replacing Chris Brand. And then Zach Moore from Minneapolis, Minnesota, will be replacing David Miller. And we still have Tanya Gill and Randy Lawrence Hurt.
So Tanya from Ontario and Randy from North Carolina.
Yes, correct.
All right. Well, tell us from your perspective how you think 2021 went in the world of diplomacy.
I actually think it went really, really well. We had so many events, both within the NADF umbrella, just most of them virtual. We did have, and this was very exciting, DipCon came back in person this year in Vermont for Carnage, and it was just so, so exciting. And I do want to say a massive congratulations to my local and fellow diplomacy player, Adam Silverman, for taking away the win on that tournament. So it can be on record. Adam, you've heard me say it. Congratulations, I am proud of you. But other than that, it was a lot of virtual events like we saw in 2020. We're still dealing with kind of the weirdness of the world and figuring out how to do that, but I think we've really nailed it down. And the most exciting part of that is I'm really excited to see all the communities come together and really want to blend in an interesting and fantastic way. So Carnage was one of the first times we saw those players come together in person, watch them interact, and figure out how that's going to change the face of face-to-face diplomacy moving forward. So as far as I know, everyone had a fantastic time. People who'd only ever played online or virtual or diplomacy in the past actually got to play in person. Everyone had nothing but glowing reviews for both the event itself and just the interaction between the players.
And you can check out the coverage of that event if you haven't watched it yet, right here on DBN. That was quite a broadcast we put on back in early November.
Yes, it was indeed. I have watched all of it. You all who were there and did all the work for it behind the scenes did such a fantastic job. The DBN, as you know, David, as you're a part of it, has been having many conversations about how to cover live events moving forward, all the exciting ideas of what we want to do, taking in ideas from the community as well. So if you have suggestions about what you want to see for us, please let us know.
Well, talk to us now about 2022. You've looked backwards a little bit. Now let's look forwards. What do you think the prospects are for 2022, both in the face-to-face world or the diplomacy world in general?
I think they're great. We're actually, the biggest problem we have right now is we have too many people who want to run events that we're running out of space on the calendar. People are butting up against each other, and that's a fantastic problem to have. I think back to 5 years ago when events were spaced months apart and some of us were, do I have to run an event to get another event on the calendar? But now we seem to just have an embarrassment of riches, which is exactly where I want to be. We are still dealing with a bit of oddness in the world, as all of you out there know. I won't talk about it too long, but COVID and Omicron have made a couple of changes already to our calendar this year. Cascadia in Vancouver, which was supposed to run late this month, is already postponing itself to the summer. And Regatta is also just announcing that they are postponing as well. So I think that means that the first face-to-face event, fingers crossed, will be whipping in San Jose. David, am I wrong about that?
Well, there's also TotalCon in Massachusetts at the end of
Right.
February, which right now at least is still looking to be a face-to-face event. We'll see how that goes. That would be the last weekend in February. And then
That's correct,
Cascadia
right.
has announced that it's going to do a virtual event the last Saturday of January. So that would be, I think, the 29th or something like that.
That would be the 29th, is Saturday, January, correct.
So that'll be on the VWDC Discord server for those that want to play a virtual event. But yeah, we have had the two that have been postponed, but then we've got plenty of others coming up on the calendar that we hope will be live, like Whipping, which is where we're going to have the North American Diplomacy Championship in
Absolutely.
or actually, I guess late April.
It's late April, bridging into early May. May 1st is the last day of the tournament. And we're really excited to be back and running it again. We haven't had any conversations about postponement. We're really confident and positive that it's really going to happen this time. And it's been a while. It's been 3 years since I've gotten to run a tournament here in San Jose. And it's just getting back to face-to-face. I'm hoping to get to at least one other event this year. I was hoping it was going to be Regatta, but we'll see when that gets rescheduled too, and go forward from there.
Yeah, and I think they're talking about doing one. The Montreal is now going to, I think if it happens, it's going to be in June, about the third weekend or so in June. Not to mention all the normal tournaments that we've had, Weasel Mood and the Boston Massacre and DixieCon and all those other ones. And of course, Carnage in November this year will be the World DipCon.
Absolutely. And so we have so much wonderful planned, and everyone's really optimistic, and we're going forward. And I haven't seen some of you in person personally for years, and I can't wait to get back to that as we move to something approaching normal with vaccines and all of the things that are going on, helping to push us in the right direction. So I think it's going to be a really exciting year. It's going to be a really big one. So, keep your stations tuned to the DBN and everyone else that does coverage and deadline news, because there's going to be a lot of work to do for all of us.
It's true. And we appreciate your leadership in that work that needs to be done. And good luck with everything this year with the NADF.
Oh, thank you so much, David. I'm really looking forward to it.
Now, let's take a trip around the various websites and YouTube channels for the content providers we call our DBN Media Partners. Ed Sullivan's podcast series, The Diplomats, just dropped a new episode focused on the semifinals of Season 7 of the online tournament on Nexus, featuring commentary from Jordan Connors, Riaz Varani, and Greg Matthews. And then the Australian Podcast Diplomacy Games was also just released an episode, including a highly interesting conversation with the spouses of podcast hosts Amby and Kaner about just what makes them tick as dynamic diplomacy media personalities, but so-so husbands. And finally, Brother Board has just added another installment of his own video series on YouTube, The Diplomacy Dojo, with this one explaining how to betray England as France and other intrigues. You can check out all of this brand new diplomacy content at the links provided on the media page of thenadf.org. In club news, the D.C. area-based Potomac Tea and Knife Society has reorganized under new leadership and with a newly revitalized home server on Discord. The PTKS is running online games, making connections to new hobbyists in Maryland, Virginia, and D.C., and is making plans to once again hold its Tempest face-to-face tournament sometime during the fall of 2022. An invite to this server can be found in the description field below. The Armada Group in the Denver, Colorado area continues to hold regular face-to-face games also, including 2 boards played on January 8th. Each of which was dominated by Austria, and one of them ending in a solo. You'll hear more about Armada during a later segment of this program. The inaugural Hobby Ambassador of the Year award was announced recently by the editors of the Diplomacy Briefing newsletter. A committee of hobbyists was formed to come up with candidates, with 4 names being submitted to the subscribers of the briefing for voting. These 4 included founder of both the VWDC and Face-to-Face Registry, Bill Hackenbracht, YouTube content creator Flash from Legendary Tactics, prolific hobby writer and thinker Brother Board, and Zachary Moore, who co-founded DBN and established the Virtual Diplomacy League where he still serves as commissioner. Zachary Moore prevailed in a close vote, with the other three also slated to receive hobby recognition for their contributions. The plan is for this award to be given on a yearly basis to help recognize and encourage the many volunteers who enhance and strengthen hobby experience for all. And yes, with this award and with the resounding success of the VDL regular season and championship, Zachary Moore can, should, and probably will take a bow. Meta/Facebook is currently running a speedboat tournament over on Web Diplomacy to gather data for their AI, which is participating in every game. Three-time Diplomacy World Champion Andrew Goff is working with them on their bot and helping to analyze the tournament games. Meta is paying players to play in this tournament at roughly $15 an hour. So if you ever want to claim the title of technically being a professional diplomacy player, this is the event for you. You can find out more information at the link provided below. You'll also hear more about web diplomacy later during this episode's panel discussion. UK diplomat Malarkey has released the first issue of the newest diplomacy zine on the web, which is called Notes on a Napkin. It features articles on hobby history, women in diplomacy, variants, what to drink while playing the game, and much more. Mal has also considered other projects planned under the rubric of his company called Diplomaticon Publishing, and he's looking for contributors for issue 2 of the zine due out in early May. To check out this latest addition to the fabric of our hobby, check out the link listed below. And now it's time for a segment we call My Favorite Things. We'll interview a diplomacy player about that player's diplomacy journey, and then we'll talk about something of particular interest to that hobbyist, whether or not related to diplomacy. In this installment, I talked to Eber Condrell about the website vDiplomacy, about diplomacy variants in general, and also about his role in revitalizing the Denver, Colorado area diplomacy club, Armada. Eber, welcome back to Deadline.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've been on the show. So could you remind our viewers again how you got into diplomacy?
Well, I first played diplomacy when I was 11 or 12 in Guangzhou, China, where I grew up. A friend of mine, actually from New Zealand, taught me the game, and we played several dozen games over a span of a few years in our community. And I first joined the online community in 2017.
Well, later in the program, we're going to have a kind of a verbal showdown between partisans of 3 dip websites about which one is the best. But so I wanted to give you the chance here to talk about one of your favorite places to play, which is vDiplomacy. So tell us a little bit about that website and why you like it.
Well, when I first was looking for somewhere to play diplomacy online, I found all the major ones, PlayDip, WebDip, vDiplomacy. And VDIP was the most interesting to me because of all the variants it had available. And to my 15-year-old brain, it was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And that I could play diplomacy on other maps. And I did end up joining WebDip soon afterward, but VDIP was the most interesting because of the variant maps.
How important do you think variants are to the hobby in terms of the growth and the health of our game?
Well, I think that variants are a logical result of progression of Calhammer's original concept and design. Because it's like the rules of diplomacy are so simple and elegant that it almost begs to have variants made, both rule and map variants. And when it comes to rule variants, the benefit they can provide to players and to the hobby is that things very simple variants like gunboat and speedboat, which are respectively no press diplomacy and then no press diplomacy with very short turns, like 5 minutes. Is that those variants can provide a really helpful learning tool for people that want to be want to get better at the game itself, because it's a way to learn tactics with less pressure, and just get a feel for the board that can really help you play regular diplomacy. And in regards to map variants, it just sort of expands the longevity of the game, allowing people to, if the classic map's getting pretty stale, which most people probably can't relate to that, but I know plenty who really enjoy playing variant maps because they don't think the classic variant is the best, and so they really like the fact that you can play on maps as diverse as ancient Mesopotamia to a future with the colonized Mars. So it's a really diverse selection to choose from. So it really helps some players who find the classic map to be a little boring after a while. But
yeah, if you're looking for another map, going to VDIP and just looking at the list of things that's available is kind of amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
I understand that V Diplomacy was down. The site itself was down for a while. What can you tell us about that and how it's going now?
Well, it's kind of a long story, and there's a couple of reasons for it. Mainly the sort of first reason is that if you ever looked at V Diplomacy and Web Diplomacy together next to each other, excuse me, they're very similar. And the reason for that is that VDIP took a lot of its code from WebDip. So much so that when they need to update, when WebDip updates, they'll update V Diplomacy as well. And usually that's fine. But this last time, the guy who owns the site is sort of on an indefinite sabbatical. And when the site was updated, the adjudicator failed and had to be, some of the moderators had to step up and spend a few days coding to get it to work again. So luckily it works again, and hopefully that won't happen again. But it was a little frightening for a while there, but
everything is now fine.
Yes, everything is fine. The site's working. And in a minute I'll talk about other sites that you can go to if V Diplomacy ever does go down again.
Well, before you do that, tell us what some of your favorite variants are to play on VDIP.
Well, there's such a great selection. It's kind of hard to choose because you can go from anywhere from their large selection of two player variants to the lots of solid alternatives to the classic map with different numbers of players, to the 50-player monstrosity that is divided states. But I'd have to say my favorite is Alacavre. It's ALACAVRE. Look it up if you don't know about it. It's pretty fascinating.
All right. Well, we'll let that be a mysterious homework assignment for people watching the show.
Yeah.
Well, where else can you play variants? If you've got the itch to try something, where else can you play besides VDIP?
Most of the major sites have a few variants. So WebDip has 3 or 4 variant maps. And I think PlayDip has a few options as well, but there's certain caveats to that. But I think the other site with the most selection is Duplicity, which is sort of an up-and-coming site and one of their devs is working really hard to get as many variants on there as possible. And I've heard him talk about it. He's really passionate about it. So that's a cool place to go. If you don't mind the interface too much, which is people's gripe about VDIP too. So whatever.
Well, there's a big debate about interfaces. I have played a Vietnam variant on Duplicity and enjoyed it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different options there, and the site's pretty good. I've heard it works better on mobile devices, but I don't know. Anyway, Primacy is also an app that was recently released that if a variant is coded correctly, it even allows players to upload their own maps to play on the app or the website. So that's pretty cool as an option. And then finally, if you're in the Discord community, the Diplomacy Variant Club is a pretty great place to be if you want to get in on the development of new variants and play test certain things and play lots of crazy map variants and worldwide crazy rule variants and worldwide variants and stuff like that. So Diplomacy Variant Club is a pretty great place to be if you're on Discord.
And that's something we can just get an invite to. We'll try to put that in our description field.
That'd be awesome.
Well, let's move on to face-to-face play for a minute, because you've been heavily involved in restarting the Armada Club in the Denver, Colorado area. So tell us a little bit about how that's going, and then give us an update on the resurrection of their tournament, which is called Regatta.
Yeah. Well, it's been growing great guns. Since July, we've had pretty much a game every month. This month in January, we managed 2 boards just barely. We had about 12 and a half players and still managed to get 14 positions filled. So that was impressive. But I ended up having to play 2 games at once, which was an ordeal to say the least. And onto the tournament, we had originally planned to schedule it to do it from March 11th to 13th, but due to various extenuating various circumstances in the world and just our own lack of preparation, we decided to postpone it to later in the summer. And that information will be released as soon as we decide on anything.
It'll be in the summer, and the exact dates and times and all that is to be announced.
Hopefully. The schedule is pretty packed, so we'll see what we can fit in.
There's always room for more.
Yeah.
Any tips out there for folks that may be wanting to start their own local club or grow their club?
I mean, you really have to ask Brian and Brandon and the guys over in Chicago about that, because they definitely have the most successful club in the world. But what I've found to work really well in my own experience is just scheduling a time every month and trying to get people to come is the best way to do it. And as far as I can see, is if you don't have a hard scheduled time, it's harder to get people to commit. And then, if you don't get 7 on a day, why not try a variant map, like Ancient Mediterranean for 5 players or something like that. So there's all kinds of options.
Who knew variants could be played face to face?
Yep. It's very rare, but it is definitely possible.
Well, Eber, I appreciate you being on the show to talk about variants and talk about Armada a little bit, and hope to see you over aboard very soon.
Absolutely. See you too.
All right. See you.
Bye.
And now for this episode's panel discussion, which I'm calling the Dipsite Derby. We'll put into the arena advocates of 3 different venues for online diplomacy. We'll let them smash each other up, and then we'll see who's left standing at the end. First, in the green corner, representing the fine folks at Web Diplomacy, it's the Predator from Purdue, the E-Carnage Eliminator, Katie No Shades of Gray. And then, in the blue corner, chomping at the bit to fight for the Play Diplomacy site, we have the cataclysmic cartographer of the Carolinas, variant designer extraordinaire Alex Runka, otherwise known online as the Punishing, no pun intended. And finally, in the black corner, holding a bomb with a lit fuse, is our competitor from Conspiracy, the Ogre of Ohio, the Nexus Nightmare, Evan No Heart Swihart. Contestants, welcome to the Derby, and let's get ready to rumble. All right, everyone, welcome to the show. And Katie, I want to start with you. Why Web Diplomacy?
Hi, David. Thanks for having me here. I am honored to represent what I think we can all agree is the best place to play diplomacy online. Web diplomacy is my personal favorite. It's where I started. So, I'm a little bit biased, but I think there are a lot of things about WebDip that are objectively very strong, and they make it a really good, it's just a really good place to find competitive games online. And I think the biggest thing is it starts with the player base. The community on WebDip is very talented. You can almost always find a competitive game, a good game. If you're looking for something more relaxed, you can find that too. There are open games advertised on the forum. Some of the best games that I've ever played in have been someone advertised on the forum, and then a group got together and started to play. Just in a few recent years, we can see some of the players that have come from WebDip that started over there that made waves in the virtual and the face-to-face community. I don't want to name drop too much, but I'm going to do it a little bit. So Tanya Gill and Karthik Konath and Makalis Kamaritis. I mean, these are all players who started out on WebDip. And I think we all agree that they're all excellent players. And that's just a very small subset. There are a lot of players on WebDip who, as far as I know, only play extended deadline. And, you know, they're very good negotiators. They're very good strategists. It's really a solid group of players. And I could talk for a long time about why I think that WebDip sort of promotes that atmosphere. I'll just condense it into a little bit for now, and we'll see where this goes. I think, like I said, one of the big benefits WebDip has is the forum. You know, as far as I know, David, Backstabber, you can't just join an open game. You have to go into the website knowing people you're going to play with. And I think that makes it really welcoming community for new players. Web Diplomacy, I think a year and a half ago, roughly introduced bots. So you can play gunboat games against bots. And I think that's helped a lot of players sort of get going with tactics and sort of get used to the game. Web Diplomacy has a ranking system called the Ghost Ratings, which sort of provide a ranking of all of the players, and you can see your relative score in different categories like gunboat or full press, and even I think the one-on-one variants. Yeah, I just think it's like there are a lot of things about WebDip that encourage competitive games and sort of mold good players. And I've had very few games on WebDip where I didn't think the quality was about my level. You know, when you're starting out, you're probably going to play with newer people, and you can dive in and you can learn a lot from the experienced players on the website. And I think that that's one of its strengths.
Quick question. Has Ghost Ratings actually been embedded to the site, or is it still run by an external?
Ghost Ratings is now embedded into the site. You can go to your player, like your homepage. I don't know, like your user page, and it will tell you your ranking for the different categories. It now also even provides a graph of your recent Ghost Ratings through the past months. So it's kind of nice. You can look and see how it's changed as you've played. Hopefully you're getting better, but sometimes you're not. And, you know, it's kind of fun to track your progress that way.
All right, Ronki, are you going to put up with this? We've heard this commercial from WebDip. What's right about play diplomacy?
So PlayDip, while Katie's kind of elaborated on strengths of WebDip and sort of the core diplomacy community, PlayDip's biggest strength is its variance. It has access to several very kind of complex maps and a lot of different rule sets that can be mixed in. So you have, I think, 7 or 8 different full color maps that, in addition to just those maps themselves, you have 8 or 10 different options with each game you run, whether you want to play with Build Anywhere or whether you want to play what we call Age of Empires, where you start with just one SC and you kind of grow from there and build anywhere, whether you want to play with Fog of War, which is available for anything as well. So there's a lot of little technical variants that you can turn on, and the permutations just go on and on, including, of course, the classic kind of gunboat or public press only. Play Diplomacy has a point-and-click interface. It also has the option to do a menu-based interface if you're on mobile and the point-and-click isn't working so great for you. There's also an option to see your orders kind of laid out in graphic form so that you can see what you've submitted so far. Play Diplomacy has a robust rating system as well, similar to the Ghost Ratings that was just described. It's had an ELO-based rating system for a long time, and it has different ELO scores for different categories, including a kind of core classic ELO versus a kind of wider ELO per variant and such like that. Play Diplomacy has an active forum community. I've been a little inactive recently because of COVID, but it has a very active forum game community where people will run games and GM them themselves as opposed to running them directly on the site. And the forum has been a great place to recruit people for that, to run games. Some people will actually do all the use the forum messaging system to handle all the press, to post maps, and there's an enormous library of different games and maps that people have run through the years. And we even have like a little unofficial awards ceremony each year to sort of celebrate who had essentially the best record, more or less, on forum games for the year, who and who wins in sort of best variant design, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's probably one of the best platforms if you want to get creative with the sort of variants you run, with the sort of people you work with. There's also some neat features for teachers and education. There's a whole schools option where if you set up a schools game and played it, you kind of have admin access, and you can set up small accounts for all your students that then you can keep them isolated to their own games and monitor their communication if you have to resolve any sort of student conflicts. And you have a lot of options for control over those games as a teacher if you work with Play Diplomacy to set that up. And so there's a lot of capability that PlayDip has above and beyond what most dip sites have.
For our viewers, we actually did a piece about that education function of Play Diplomacy back in the February 2021 edition of Deadline News. We had an interview about that. If you are interested in that, go back and find that on the DBN YouTube channel. You can go watch that interview. All right, Evan, you've heard from these two who are representing the the older, more established websites. You're representing Conspiracy, the Android app, one of the newer kids on the block. So tell me why your method of play is good or better than what we've had before.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I'm definitely coming at this from a little bit of a different perspective. What I love about Conspiracy is, like you said, it's an app. It's a little more modern, and it has a lot of advantages that the older sites don't have. So the biggest thing for me, and I've been playing Conspiracy about a year, is the ease to do press games. So I actually started on Play Diplomacy about 2 years ago. Enjoyed that for a while, and got into the virtual face-to-face world. But and once I was doing virtual face-to-face with the comms over Discord, I didn't feel like I wanted to invest all the time that it took to sit down at the computer and write log messages on Play Diplomacy to have good games. The Conspiracy app solved a lot of that for me, because now it was just on my phone. It was really convenient. I would get the notifications when somebody messaged me, and it was like responding to a text. Just a group of you and 6 friends who had a long text thread that you were playing a game at the same time. I also love that it did not flood my inbox with emails that I need for, say, Backstabber to let me know when a game adjudicates. I got to go in and delete those emails pretty much on a daily basis so I could see the important ones come through. But the Conspiracy app is just a push notification, which is great. Definitely the strengths are different than the strengths of the other groups. So I've played a few of the public games on the Conspiracy app, and they tend to take a long time to get going and have a pretty high NMR rate. But I believe I've heard that if you play for long enough, you find your way into some other more reliable players once you increase your reliability. But I can't speak firsthand about that. But the best way I like to interact with the app is to join quality games through, for example, the Nexus server, where you're playing quality people and playing them in multiple games in a league format that's organized independently of the app, but comes with all the benefits of using the app for your game.
Well, I guess we should point out that that's true, that Nexus entry point is true also for WebDip and for PlayDip, because, of course, the whole point of Nexus is that it is a nexus between all of these methods or modes of play. Katie, let me give you a minute just to respond since you went first. Anything you want to say in response to what the other two guys have said?
A couple things. I will say reliability sometimes can be something that really holds up games, especially with new players or people you're not familiar with. Web Diplomacy does have a pretty strict reliability rating system. In fact, one of the complaints that a lot of people got, or that the mods got from a lot of people, was that when we updated it, people were upset that their reliability was too low. But what I think the overall effect that had was, there's a cutoff point for your reliability ranking when you make a game, and so then you're only accepting, like, the site only lets you join it if you have whatever that reliability is. So that, I think, has decreased the number of NMRs a lot. And then the games will sort of wait and allow someone to take over before processing. So it's actually very, very rare that a game will be processed with no orders received, because somebody will sub in for it. And I think that's is really crucial, right? Because an NMR can totally throw off the balance of the game.
Yes.
I I think that's the main thing. I think that's the main thing I had to respond to.
Sure, that's fine. Well, I have to admit right now, I come to this as someone who's played primarily on Backstabber, which is, of course, the site that we use on DBN for our league and tournament coverage. So I'm coming at this from that perspective. Alex, I wanted to ask you, as opposed to what I'm used to in Backstabber, I find the order entry or the point and click interface for PlayDip to be a little clunky. Am I right about this, or am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Answer.
Some of it's
right.
age.
Okay.
Some of it's age.
Wait. Are you calling me old?
Yes. No, some of it is age and just how the mechanism works. So Backstabber is run with vector-based graphics in the background and kind of dynamically generates the map that you see, dynamically generates the orders as you go through, versus an kind of older set of code in PlayDip, and that's very similar to, in some ways, to what's in WebDip as well, that's running on PHP and having to create images, kind of forming them in the background before it posts them. So it's not as able to be dynamic and respond to what you're doing. Backstabber also has a very different UI theming to it. And some people actually really hate it. I personally like both of them. They have their strengths, but Backstabber is really focused on making it almost feel like the board game itself, where you have a very simple layout. You see a very clear difference between a piece and an SC that you own. Those are the only things that have any color, because Backstabber usually doesn't color in maps unless that's a big change recently or something. So versus like how WebDip and PlayDip and Conspiracy all will color the map as you go around, making it almost sort of look like a world map that is changing as you go through. One kind of big oddball thing with Play Diplomacy is just from a historical standpoint, when it was built by a Maltese owner and a Romanian team of programmers, and the colors that they picked were not the default ones, either from the US or the British set of the game. And so my understanding of the story is that they mostly matched some international version of the board game, which had totally different colors. And if you dig through the various versions, you'll see some of them are quite crazy color combinations. And it's one of those things that people start hating and eventually just learn to love, and then get grumpy if anyone tries to change it, which I did try to change at some point. That project got killed. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge. I think the web interface on PlayDip has made some pretty significant improvements over the years. The ability to see your orders, the ability to skip the graphic interface entirely and use drop-down menus similar to WebDip for people who are having trouble doing the point and click, especially in a phone context. It works fairly well in a browser. If you're looking at a browser on a PC and you click and click, and then you've got it all going there, you know, it responds to whether you're trying to do a support. So you click to say those to make the support and such like that. And then you have things like the messaging interface, which is very email based and meant to be very email based. And so that's another kind of difference. If I remember from WebDip, it has more of a chat, like you're switching from person to person. Here's your chat and here's your kind of chat log, versus sending complete messages that can then be forwarded to other people, that can then be sent as group messages. And so it very much behaves like an inbox, which is just a different way to do press. It's a little more complicated, but again, Play Diplomacy tends to value capability over simplicity, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
So there's strengths along those lines. It's a very different experience. Backstabber is really, I found it's been best when you already know the people you're going to play with. If you have a group of friends and you want to play Diplomacy and you know exactly who you're playing with and you're not caring about any ratings or such like that, Backstabber's a really good option to just jump in there with them. But if you're looking for people to play with you and you don't already have your preset gamers, that's not really a great option.
Evan, let's go back to you. Thank you, Alex. Evan, let's go back to you regarding Conspiracy. When Conspiracy first came out, I played a bunch of games on it, particularly gunboat games, and I found the experience to be fun, but still not quite as easy for me to use the order entry interface as Backstabber. How do you compare the two?
Yeah, well, I think Conspiracy is designed for the phone, so it has a few differences like that. Where I think Backstabber was designed to be used on a computer that just happened to work very well on a phone. And I don't know, I my experience with it has been it takes pretty much the same number of clicks on Conspiracy to enter orders as it does on Backstabber. Maybe one additional one for the move order. But the big strength of Conspiracy, I think, is it solves a problem that Backstabber has, and I think WebDip and PlayDip also solve this problem with convoys and with accidentally issuing illegal orders. So convoys on Conspiracy are particularly nice because once the convoy is ordered correctly, the line, the movement line from the unit that is moving locks into the fleets. So before, while it's incorrect, it appears as red and it's doesn't go through the fleet icons themselves. But once the fleets order the correct convoy orders and everything matches up, you see that the movement line lock into place, which I think is a great feature for newer players. And I know we've all, if you've watched any DBN, have seen the invalid convoy orders. And it's also very good with supports. And make sure that you don't accidentally issue a support from a province that doesn't have a unit or something like that. So I appreciate the interface. It definitely has. It looks a little cluttered compared to Backstabber, but it's got a lot of features that I think are an improvement over the Backstabber order entering.
Does Conspiracy let you deliberately place illegal orders?
No, it does not, which
Okay.
makes Gunboat a little bit different. What I have seen is people will issue convoy or movement orders over convoys that could practically work, but would never actually work to communicate in Gunboat. But that's about the limit of invalid orders.
Legal, just not actually intended. Yeah.
Right.
So that's a very pretty big difference in philosophy with how the interface is designed and how the games are designed. Because unless something is drastically changed, WebDip doesn't allow you to do deliberately legal orders either. And that was a choice on PlayDip's designer's part to say, just as in the board game, we want people to be able to fudge things and make it look like they made an error, or if they just don't know what's going on, we want them to make an error. And so that is common between PlayDip and Backstabber in that they will both let you put in bogus stuff on purpose.
Well, I was gonna ask Katie about that because the drop-down menu function in WebDip, which is one of the reasons why you can't do, intentionally screwed up orders in WebDip, is because of the drop-down menu sort of function, which I think looks kind of dated, but that just may be because I am myself kind of dated. So I was going to give you a chance, Katie, to defend that or talk about that as a difference between WebDip and others.
Well, David, I think if you're using yourself as an example, then we can all agree that dated doesn't necessarily mean bad. Okay.
Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
the interface is old. The drop-down menu is not extremely pretty to look at. It definitely changes play a little bit, especially in Gunboat, like Evan was saying. I just noticed that because I'm playing my first Gunboat on WebDip in a long time. I don't love Gunboat, but I'm playing it. And I realize I can't make, incorrect orders, which, well, I can mess up my orders, but, not signaling orders like Evan was talking about. But I think that every time you start out on some platform, you're used to a certain UI, you're going to get used to that pretty quickly. And then if you change, it's going to take a second to change, sort of to get used to it and change your opinion on it. When I first started on Backstabber for virtual, I hated Backstabber's interface. I didn't think it was ugly, but I thought it was confusing. I still don't like the convoys with the squiggles. I think that's kind of terrible. I didn't like how it didn't change the provinces. I realized with the colors, I realized that there's a setting somewhere that you can adjust.
You can do it now. Yeah, you can do it now.
So I did that to make it more like what I was used to on WebDip, and that helped me. But I really think that, you're just going to be used to what you're used to. And the WebDip map is very readable. I mean, it might not be aesthetically pleasing, but it contains all of the information that you need to know. And if you're having trouble reading the map, then you can always look at the listed orders. But the drop-down menu, I think it helps newer players. I think whether it's a feature or a bug just depends on if you want to be able to make those invalid orders. And I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion for or against it. It hasn't really affected my play on the site. But yeah, I don't think dated necessarily means old, David. Or sorry, I don't think dated necessarily means bad.
Well, that it does mean old, but that's good to hear. Well, in the interest of time, I think I'm going to jump down to our final argument section and give each of you a chance to either go on offense or defense. Give me your best remaining argument, either for the site that you're in favor of or against one of the others. That's fine with me if you go negative or positive. Alex, I'm going to start with you and go.
Well, I think probably the best way to experience the real strengths of play diplomacy is to get into a game of either Versailles or War in the Americas, or one of the other multiplayer alternate maps, and just see what the capabilities are. Maybe even play a Fog of War game there, and just see how you can totally reshape the face of what you'd call diplomacy, have those same core mechanics, but really bring in some fascinating new gameplay aspects in order to experience something new and different, and really cool.
Spoken as our as our resident variant enthusiast would have said. All right. Well, it is time for you, Katie, and now.
Yeah, I think that like I said in the beginning, the biggest strength WebDip has is its players, and it's a really good group. You can find good games there. The biggest weakness is purely aesthetic, and I think so. WebDip is partnering up with Meta and with Facebook, and they've been working a lot on bots over there, and they have plans to sort of revamp the look of the site. So I think, in a short amount of time, we'll be able to see an updated, more modernized site, which I think will be nice. But in the meantime, I don't personally find it that offensive, and I don't think it detracts from the solid strengths that WebDip does have. So,
all right, Evan, you've got the last word, so lay it on us.
Yeah, I'll circle back to what I said at the top. I think Conspiracy's big strength is the simplicity of playing press games. If you were like me, where you got out of press, extended deadline press, just because it sucked up so much of your time, Conspiracy might be a good way to get back into it, because it's easy, pops up on your phone just like text messages, and you probably are spending about the same amount of time in the game, but you can chunk it up into manageable bites, just from your phone instead of from a laptop or from an interface that is a little harder to see on a phone. So I definitely encourage people to join Nexus. Shameless plug for the Nexus Leagues. Join a Conspiracy game. And you'll get a great quality game that's a lot easier to jump into.
Well, I appreciate that, and I want to thank you all for being on the show, and I want to go ahead and say a couple of quick things for our viewers that are watching this. We don't mean to leave out Primacy and Duplicity and some other places you can play. We just couldn't fit so many on the screen. And also on this same episode, there will be an interview with Eber Condrell about V-Diplomacy, which is another site that people play on, and we'll talk a little bit more about variants there. And the last thing is that we've had a little fun with the back and forth here, but we all agree, and I think I'm speaking for everyone, we like the fact that we have so many options. We're not actually against any of them. We're just in favor of having plenty of options for people to play diplomacy online and virtual, and we're thankful for all those options. So, guys, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
And thanks to all of you watching at home. We hope you have enjoyed this broadcast of Deadline. If you have news, ideas for features, or feedback of any kind, please feel free to send an email to info@diplobn.com, or you can drop me a line directly at davidhood@dixiecon.com. For our other broadcast offerings, visit our website at diplobn.com. This is David Hood signing off. I wish you brightness and bliss, and, of course, Belgium.